You've seen the thumbnail. 5 years, $1 million. For almost everyone watching this, that's not realistic, and pretending otherwise doesn't help you. Here's what building wealth in 5 years actually looks like for someone with an ordinary income and no windfalls. The real numbers, not the thumbnail version. One idea worth holding on to before the numbers start. Small. Consistent amounts add up to real money over time. Not because any single contribution is dramatic, but because the mechanism doesn't need drama to work. That's the actual theme of everything that follows. Quick one before we get into this. If realistic numbers over hype are useful to you, hit subscribe. New video every week. Using a standard compound interest calculator, starting from zero, investing $500 a month at a 7% real annual return, that's the market's long-term historical average after adjusting for inflation, grows to somewhere around $36,000 after 5 years. At $1,000 a month. That same math gets you to somewhere around $72,000 after 5 years. Both numbers are real, both are achievable for someone earning a solid but ordinary income, and neither one is $1 million. The honest headline of this video, 5 years of consistent investing, gets most people somewhere in the $36,000 to $72,000 range of new net worth. Not generational wealth. That's still a genuinely significant 5 years, it's just not a thumbnail. Not everyone has $500 a month sitting around either. The math scales the same way in both directions. $250 a month at the same 7% real return lands at roughly half of $36,000, somewhere around $18,000 after 5 years. Smaller starting number, same mechanism, same 5 years. One more thing worth being precise about. This video has been using the 7% real figure on purpose, not the 10.5% nominal average. Real means already adjusted for inflation, so the $36,000 and $72,000 numbers represent actual purchasing power in today's dollars. Not a bigger-looking number that inflation quietly eats into over 5 years. The videos claiming much bigger 5-year outcomes usually aren't lying about their own numbers, they're leaving out the starting conditions. A pre-existing business, a 6-figure income, a windfall, or a much higher risk tolerance than the market's own average. Each of those changes the math in a completely different way. A pre-existing business means income streams this video's $500 and $1,000 examples don't assume at all. A 6-figure income means the contribution amount itself is bigger, which the next section will show matters more than almost anything else. A windfall is a lump sum on top of the monthly contribution, not a replacement for it. And a higher risk tolerance means more of the money sits in stocks specifically, with the wider range of outcomes that comes with it. None of these are wrong to have, they're just not the ordinary income. No windfall scenario this video is actually built around. And even the 7% real return used in this video is an average. Large company stocks, as a group, have historically lost money in about 1 out of every 3 years. 5 years is short enough that a bad stretch can genuinely change your outcome, in either direction. Daniel's own 5-year stretch wasn't a smooth, straight line to $36,000. There were real down months in the middle of it. The 7% figure is where it landed after 5 years, not what every single year looked like along the way. A much higher risk tolerance than the market's own average is worth pausing on, because it's not just a personality trait, it's a genuine checkable input. Tools like the risk tolerance resources on Investor.gov exist specifically to help you figure out where you actually sit before picking a stock to bond mix, instead of guessing based on how a video made you feel in the moment. 3 things actually move your own version of this number. First, contribution amount. The difference between $500 and $1,000 a month is the entire difference between $36,000 and $72,000. Second, consistency. Dollar cost averaging, meaning investing the same amount on the same schedule regardless of what the market is doing that month, is what actually captures the long-term average instead of trying and failing to time it. Third, fees. Broad index funds typically charge somewhere between 0.03 and 0.2% a year. Actively managed funds often charge 0.5% to 1.5%. Over 5 years, that difference is real money quietly not compounding for you. Most actively managed funds fail to beat a simple index fund over periods of 15 years or longer, according to long-running industry research. The boring choice is, on average, the mathematically better one. Put a rough number on that fee gap, on a balance that grows towards $72,000. The difference between a 0.03% fund and a 1% fund compounds every single year on a growing balance, not just the original contribution. Which is exactly why it's worth checking a fund's expense ratio before committing 5 years of contributions to it, not after. Everything so far assumed 100% stocks. Most people building toward a 5-year goal specifically, not a 30-year retirement, spread the money across stocks and bonds instead, using something like a 3-fund portfolio, U.S. stocks, international stocks, and bonds combined. Diversification itself isn't limited to just stocks versus bonds, either. Spreading money across asset classes, sectors, and geographies, not just U.S. companies, but international ones too, and not just one industry, is the same underlying principle showing up at a smaller scale, which is exactly why the 3-fund portfolio this video keeps referencing includes an international stocks slice, not just a U.S. one. Bonds are a loan. You lend money to the government or a company and get paid back with interest. They historically return less than stocks over long periods, but they also don't lose value the same way in a bad year, which matters more on a 5-year clock than a 30-year one. The trade-off is direct. More bonds means a lower expected final number, but also a narrower range of possible outcomes. 100% stocks might land above $72,000 in a good 5 years, or meaningfully below $36,000 in a bad one. A mixed portfolio narrows both ends. There's actually a third rung below bonds worth naming: cash and high-yield savings. Stocks have historically beaten bonds over periods of 20 years or longer, but they also carry the highest short-term volatility of the three. Bonds sit in the middle. Cash and a high-yield savings account, currently paying somewhere around 4 to 5%, sit at the bottom, lowest risk, lowest return, but zero chance of showing up below $36,000 the day you need it, and federally insured up to $250,000 per depositor. Per bank. Which rung any part of this 5-year goal belongs on depends entirely on how firm that 5-year date actually is. One thing this video hasn't addressed yet: which account actually holds this money. A 401k or an IRA offers real tax benefits, but they're built around a retirement length horizon, not a fixed 5-year goal. Pulling money out of a retirement account before retirement age generally isn't something you do without giving something up. For a 5-year goal specifically, a regular taxable brokerage account is the better fit. When you eventually sell at a profit, long-term capital gains are taxed at 0, 15, or 20% depending on your income. And the wash sale rule still applies here too. Sell at a loss and buy the same or a nearly identical investment back within 30 days. And you can't claim that loss on your taxes. This isn't an either-or. Daniel's 5-year money sits in taxable, completely separate from whatever's already happening in his retirement accounts. The 5-year goal doesn't pause the rest of his investing. And the rest of his investing doesn't touch the 5-year goal. Worth naming briefly, HSAs, 529 education accounts, and other tax-advantaged vehicles all exist too, each built around its own specific goal: a health expense, an education expense. None of them are the right fit for a plain, unrestricted 5-year savings goal either. A taxable brokerage account isn't the consolation option here. For this specific goal, it's the correct one. Risk tolerance depends heavily on time horizon. Someone 30 or more years from needing the money can typically handle more stock exposure, since there's time to recover from a bad stretch. Someone on a strict 3-year clock is in a meaningfully different position than someone on 5. If your actual goal is 3 years out instead of 5. The honest answer is that less of that money belongs in stocks at all. The 1 in 3 years down statistic from earlier means a real chance of needing to withdraw during a down year, which locks in a loss instead of just riding it out. This isn't a reason to avoid investing. It's a reason to match the mix to the actual timeline, not to whichever 5-year example a video happened to use. Put concretely, using the risk ladder from earlier, a 5-year goal can reasonably sit closer to the stocks and bonds end of that ladder. A 3-year goal should sit noticeably closer to the cash and high-yield savings end, not necessarily all the way down to it, but meaningfully closer, because there's less time on the clock to recover from whichever third of the possible years turns out to be a down one. There's one more adjustment worth making that this video hasn't covered yet. Target date funds handle this automatically by design. They diversify and rebalance the mix as the target date gets closer. Applied manually to a 5-year goal, that means the stock-heavy allocation from earlier doesn't have to stay fixed for all 5 years. A bad year is a very different problem depending on when it happens. The 1 in 3 years down statistic from earlier is fine to absorb in year 1, there's still 4 years to recover. That same bad year in year 5, right when the money is about to be used, locks in the loss instead of just writing it out. The practical version of this doesn't need to be complicated. Stay closer to the stock-heavy end of the mix through the first 3 years. Then start shifting a portion into bonds and cash starting in year 4, with more of that shift completed by the time year 5 actually arrives. The goal isn't to time the market, it's to make sure the money isn't sitting in maximum volatility on the exact day you need to spend it. Practically, this isn't a 5-year project that requires constant attention. It's one decision, the contribution amount and the fund mix, set up once as an automatic transfer, then left alone. The automatic transfer itself matters more than it sounds like. Setting it up the same day a paycheck lands, or scheduling it for right after, means the $500 or $1,000 contribution never has to compete against whatever else that money could have been spent on that month. The decision gets made once, in advance, instead of getting renegotiated every single payday. The version of this that fails is checking daily and reacting to every dip. The version that actually reaches $36,000 or $72,000 is the version where you set the contribution and then, deliberately, mostly, stop looking. Daniel isn't checking his balance because he's disciplined in some special way. He's not checking it because the automatic transfer already made the only decision that mattered. A quarterly or annual check-in. Did the contribution amount keep up with a raise? Is the fund still low cost? Does the stock-to-bond mix still match how many years are actually left? Is realistically all the ongoing attention this needs. Concretely, this week looks like: open a taxable brokerage account if one doesn't exist yet, choose abroad. Low-fee index fund or a simple stock and bond mix based on how firm the 5-year date is, set the automatic contribution at whichever of the 2 levels from earlier actually fits the budget. And set a reminder for year 4 to start the glide path shift. Everything after that first transfer is just repetition and time. $500 a month, roughly $36,000 after 5 years. $1,000 a month, roughly $72,000. $250 a month, roughly $18,000, the same mechanism, just scaled to what actually fits the budget. Not $1 million, a real, achievable number for an ordinary income, built from consistency and low fees, diversified across sectors and geographies. Held in a taxable account since this money isn't meant to wait for retirement, de-risked as year 5 gets close, and adjusted for how much time you actually have, not from any single lucky year. The starting conditions on the bigger thumbnails were never the point. The math behind an ordinary income was. This video is for educational purposes only and is not personalized financial advice. The 7% real return used here is a long-term historical average, not a guarantee. Any individual 5-year period can perform significantly better or worse. Contribution limits, tax rates, and account rules referenced in this video change over time and vary by individual circumstances. Verify current figures at IRS.gov and Investor.gov, and run your own numbers with a compound interest calculator before making any decision. Next video, we're breaking down renting versus buying. What the actual math says, not the conventional wisdom. Subscribe so you don't miss it. New videos every week on the personal finance topics school never